I got interested in photography as a kid because my father was an amateur photographer, like a camera club photographer, and he had built a dark room in the house that I grew up in. So I spent time with him in the dark room watching pictures being developed. Uh, uh, and that gave me sort of my start and interest in photography, and to grow up with photographs on the wall that my father had made, framed photos in our living room, and copies of U.S. camera annuals. So in a sense, I grew up with photography. It was interesting to me from the beginning. It was something that uh, connected to my father once he died, and something that I sort of carried on being interested in. It was also something really concrete and immediate, something that I could relate to without study. I didn't need to go to art school to think about photography. I could really, think about it immediately as something that reflected the world, and the world that I was interested in. It's hard for me to connect the music and photo writing, except that one of the things that I really thought about when I was writing about music is what were these people saying? What were people singing about that I was interested in? From Aretha Franklin to Madonna, what were they saying to us? What were they communicating? Um, so I always related to lyrics, uh, which again is sort of something concrete, something that I could pin down and think about and write about. And so when I started writing about photography, I wrote about work that was fairly concrete, uh, work that was primarily uh, about people, uh, artists who were interested in the world around them. And that's, in a sense, the one connection between writing about music and writing about photography. I'm drawn mostly to portraiture, pictures of people. I collect mainly images of men because I'm kind of fascinated by various ways of looking at masculinity and typing it over the ages. So from Van Gloden to Larry Clark, the way we've made pictures of men and how they reflect what we think of men, from very many different viewpoints. So that's, but basically, outside of my own collection, I'm most interested in portraiture, uh, and in sort of the social landscape and street work, things like that, things that involve people and society. I love abstract work as well, but uh, I tend much more often to obsess about images of people. Well, with fashion photography, there's so much, but it's Avedon. It's Richard Avedon, uh, that for me embodies the spirit of fashion. Um, he broke from the traditional fashion work of Beaton and Horst and Hoenigan Hune, um, and did something completely modern, completely about the world around him. Um, he was really consumed with the culture and fascinated by theater, dance, film. So all that was reflected in his fashion work. He made images that were very much about the moment that he was living in, that we were living in. So I think it was that his pictures were lively, they were exciting, they were a complete break from the sort of formal work that had come before them, and everything after that had to reflect Avedon's achievement. I mean, the person I think that carries that on best is Stephen Meisel. Again, somebody who reflects the world as he finds it, makes ravishing pictures, but also really is always aware of the world as it's changing. Well, Peter Hujar was a good friend. Um, I didn't feel I had much distance on his work when I knew him, but the major impact he had on me was spending time with a photographer who was trying to make a career, who was putting together a life uh, through mostly commercial work, but when he could get it. Um, but it made me very aware of photography as a job. Uh, and I think that really affected the way I approached photography when I started writing about it. I was really curious about how photographers made a life of it, how they managed, because it wasn't just about art. I knew they had to somehow scrape by. Uh, Early on, weren't that many shows of photography, and even when there were, it wasn't likely that people were making a lot of money from them. So, in a sense, Peter, as much as I now am totally absorbed in Peter's aesthetic, it was Peter's life that affected me most. And after that, I always approached photography as a job. I knew that it wasn't an easy one, and that's kind of what that was his main influence for me. Well, it seems to me critical writing that there's quite a bit of critical writing online. I can't say that I pay a whole lot of attention to that, but I know that there are a lot of forums online for people to write about photography critically. And I also think that even the mainstream coverage of photography has has really consciously uh, paid more attention to smaller galleries, to emerging artists, um, to new work. So I think even the New York Times, uh, often their brief reviews are of um downtown galleries, new artists, um, and I think that makes a huge difference. Uh, I often feel uh, that the established artist gets slighted, uh, but I can understand the focus on new work, and I think there's quite a bit of that in the what's left of the mainstream criticism. Um, but again, since I don't pay a whole lot of attention to online forums, I'm assuming there's a lot more critical coverage out there than I'm aware of.